This is the life or death of a beautiful, fun, and incredible sister. Please, save my daughter and take her home. Please. Any information, any little information, please take it. In the early morning of March 12th, 2022, 18-year-old Naomi Irion disappeared from a Walmart branch parking lot in a hurry and without a trace. Her siblings began to move and discovered, thanks to the kindness of the security staff, that the store's cameras managed to capture the moment when a man gets into the girl's car and drives without even giving Naomi time to get out of it. Time is running out, and with very little information, the family began to scour all possible places to find information about the young woman. No one imagined that every step they took would lead them to a rather turbulent resolution. Her case was one of those that unfortunately faced the incompetence and irresponsibility of the officers in the Nevada area in the United States. What occurred? What was discovered? Well, in this video I'm going to tell you. A video longer than what I usually make for you. Naomi Irion was 18 years old at the time of her disappearance. She lived with one of her older brothers in the United States, while her 6 other siblings had moved to the North American country just a year ago. They had all lived in shelters in different countries in Europe and Africa, due to their father's work related to the national government. The young woman had decided to move to the United States because she wanted to have a bit more freedom, experience what it was like to feel like an adult, and the best option to be able to live and cover her expenses was to move in with her older brother and share expenses. I was going to move, but then my brother said to me, "Why don't you just pay me the rent for the room in the house and you can live here?" And I thought, that sounds pretty good, I'm not gonna lie, and I could stay here. It's a place where I feel comfortable, a neighborhood I know, easy to get to work. It's a good deal, it will be interesting. For Casey Valley, the fact that his sister wasn't at home when he woke up was something normal. She left the house very early and arrived at the store's parking lot around 5 in the morning to wait to start her work shift. In fact, during the work hours, her day went by completely normally. In the brothers' routine, Casey usually went to bed before she got home from work or at night, so he hadn't realized that the young woman hadn't returned home. It was the next day that the worry became intense. Naomi was not at home, and there were no signs that she had arrived at any point during the night. That's when he started calling her, only to realize that any kind of communication was not reaching its destination. On the morning of March 13th, Casey filed a missing person report. In his complaint, he mentioned that he tried to communicate with her on several occasions, and that he could not get past the voicemail, something that was not normal since Naomi spent a lot of time with her cell phone, either chatting with her friends or on her social networks, which she kept constantly updated. There were also no movements in her bank account. Everything indicated that the situation was a risky one. The officer who took his call told him that one of them would come to his house to take the report personally, but no one did. In fact, 2 hours after the man ended this communication, he received a call from the same place, and this led to the first failure on the part of the security forces. I told him what was happening, and he says, "Listen, I'm not gonna file a missing person report for this. 18-year-old kids, she's 18, she can do whatever she wants. You don't really have any evidence that shows something could have happened to her." I told him, this is not normal for her, because if she didn't come home today, it probably means she didn't go to work either, and I don't know what happened to her. Casey felt disappointed by the way the officers handled his sister's case, so he decided to go out on his own to look for her. Together with his girlfriend, they decided to go to Walmart as soon as possible and talk to the security staff to review the cameras. Casey remembered that his brother always used the same place to park his car, because when he arrived at the store, he saw it. It was a 1992 Mercury, a model that was hardly seen on the streets, so it was easy to recognize. The images weren't of the best quality, but they could clearly see the moment where things got strange. At 5.9 minutes past the morning of Saturday, March 12th, 2022, Naomi arrives at the Walmart parking lot and stays inside the vehicle. Moments later, a man covered with a hooded sweater appears walking from the lower right corner of the image and stares at the car for a few moments. Or well, for a few minutes. Then he starts to walk with determination until he gets close to the car. He circles around to the driver's seat, instantly getting into the vehicle, and without wasting any time, he starts the car and leaves the place. At no point is the young woman seen getting out of it. So with this information, Casey contacts the officers again to tell them that there is evidence that his sister was kidnapped. We would think that this is enough to take the case seriously, right? Well, the same officer who refused to take the report the first time saw the images and had a completely different thought. The police officer sits down and watches it, and he says, "I don't know, this looks like a drug deal." I told him, "My sister doesn't do drugs." At the same time, Naomi's parents were traveling in South Africa where her father was working with the local US embassy. They found out when their eldest son told them what had happened, and they immediately sought a way to return to the country to join the search. Fortunately, the family had contact within the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which sped up the investigation process. 2 days after the disappearance, the police investigation officially begins, using the video found by Casey. With a simple analysis, they discovered that the man seen in the images was wearing blue pants, a light-colored sweatshirt or jersey, and a mask covered his face. They also discovered that the suspect was between 1.80 and 1.95 in height. The quality of the image, as I had mentioned, and the man's position in front of the camera made it impossible to find more details. The quality wasn't very good. In fact, we realized that his face is not visible at any moment. With this information and the support of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to start the investigation, an intense search began among the different commercial establishments in the area. Everyone was required to present a copy of their security cameras from the day before the deprivation of freedom and the same day of the event. Indeed, a local gas station provided the most revealing images. Up until that moment, hours before her disappearance, Naomi had stopped to buy some snacks before going to work. The officers immediately began to circulate the image, as it was potentially the last real image of the young woman before her disappearance. On the other hand, the family continued to do the search work without relying on the steps of the police. Her mother, along with the women of her neighborhood, dedicated the entire day to the search for Naomi. On the other hand, her father continued investigating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, monitoring every move and going out to patrol the area alongside the responsible agents. Her brother Casey also didn't stay still, and every day he went out to scour the desert area for any trace of his sister's car. The search continued like this, and so the search continued for a few days until finally the first relevant discovery was made. It turns out that Naomi had gone on a date with a man she didn't know the day before her disappearance. She had mentioned to her brother that they had gone to a used clothing store on this date, but she hadn't said much more about it. It was also known that she had mentioned being harassed at her job. Her bosses knew about it, and apparently had taken internal action on the matter. At the same time, the detectives from Lyon County make a very important discovery that changes the perspective of the investigation. 3 days after the young woman's disappearance, her car was completely abandoned in a deserted area. The car was found near a paint factory, a few meters from the place where she had been deprived of her freedom, abandoned with marks on the ground indicating how it was parked. Soon they would make a new discovery, again thanks to the security cameras in the area. The car is recorded by the cameras of a parking lot near the asphalt, which then picks it up again when it is parked in a dirt space, around 3:30 in the afternoon, 10 hours after the abduction. The situation changed almost an hour later, when a bluish-gray truck makes the same route and parks near the vehicle. The driver, whom we still cannot identify, gets out of his car and approaches Naomi's, where he gets in and moves it to another space, making a maneuver that apparently tries to leave traces a few meters away. Then he gets out, gets into his truck, and leaves the place. Why did he do this? That question. Well, so far there was no specific reason, but fortunately the model of the truck made the investigation progress quickly. It was a 2020 Chevrolet Silverado, so a list was made of all the people in the county who owned a truck of this style. This search seemed difficult, but soon progress was made until they found a particular person, a man named Troy Driver, whose record was far from clean. This man's life seemed to be quite normal, an employee of a mining company who lived with his girlfriend, Zulema, and her 2 children. He also claimed to be a nature lover and enjoyed going camping. Unfortunately, this man's life was not entirely rosy, and his reality was quite the opposite. To begin with, Driver was a man who had a rather particular criminal record, which began at the young age of 14 in the year 1994. His first victims had been animals who suffered torture until the end of their lives, and less than a year later, other charges such as physical violence, theft, and armed robbery would begin to add up. By 1997, at his 17 years old, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for having been an accomplice to a crime committed by his girlfriend at that time. Drive pleaded guilty to having helped to dispose of the body, but clearly this was not the only case he was involved in. In March 2021, for example, exactly 1 year before Naomi's disappearance, he had been reported for inappropriate conduct. The complainant had been his 16-year-old stepdaughter, and the report was closed because the young girl did not want to cooperate with the investigation. But the question is, did she not want to, or was she unable to? Because let's remember that she and her brother live under the same roof as the alleged harasser. In addition, among all these details, his height was added to the list, which matched the information the officers had, among other details, and thus, Troy became the main suspect in Naomi's disappearance. Armed with these details, the investigators began to station their uniformed officers in areas close to his residence to keep him under surveillance. Meanwhile, they were also arranging for a warrant to search his home and the records of the work and personal cell phones he used to determine his location, something that would initially give mixed signals. When the investigation was conducted, they discovered that both cell phones indicated that at the time of the crime, Driver was at his residence, surprisingly at a time, if it weren't for the fact that at that same hour, the Walmart cameras had captured him making some purchases. That, and also, the gas station cameras captured the moment when he approached to fill his tank. Finally, the most important detail was the van that was parked in the open area in front of the Walmart parking lot at 4:22 in the morning on the day of the kidnapping. And if anything else was needed to confirm their suspicions, more than one security camera caught him walking in the area near the teenager's car, and also in nearby parking lots. It was clear that he had come to that place with only one purpose: to find his victim. However, it took 13 days from the disappearance until the officers finally made an arrest. But here's the most important question: where is Naomi? Well, there were still no signs or clues to her whereabouts. At the time of carrying out the operation, Driver looked relaxed, as if he had nothing to hide. The officers noted that he was cooperative, asked some questions, but did not object to being arrested. When the suspect arrived at the police station, the officers already had warrants ready for the search of his house and his mother's, who, by the way, was not at all happy with the situation. The officers let her know that they had a warrant, and needed to talk to her and her husband to inform them of the current situation. In addition, there were children inside the house, so they had to take precautions with them. Why do they want to take our guns? We have reason to believe that Troy has firearms here. We're going to take them to the lab to see if there's any kind of deoxyribonucleic acid or fingerprints that belong to Troy on any of the weapons in this residence. The Driver's parents assured that they have 4 weapons hidden in a place far from the children to avoid accidents. And within the woman's anger, she simply assured that they have nothing to hide, and that the police could check everything, simply avoiding to destroy their house. Zulema, on the other hand, Troy's girlfriend and their children, would also be taken to the police station for questioning. Meanwhile, the interrogation of the main suspect is being carried out along with other police officers. Are you aware of the kidnapping case of Naomi Irion? Yes. Can you tell me about it? My girlfriend sent me something from Facebook about it, and I read that she was kidnapped, and a van very similar to mine. They said they were looking for her. Is that why I'm here? Yes, why? You said it, right? Do you have a van that looks just like that one? And why do I have a van that looks just like it? Are you blaming me for that? Yes. I want a lawyer. Troy decides to stop talking and request a lawyer, claiming to be innocent. But in the meantime, the investigation is presenting new evidence. Zulema confirms that the weekend of Naomi's disappearance, her family had a gathering that everyone attended, except for Troy, as he had other things to do. To gather more information, the woman is then interrogated by the officers and is also informed about her boyfriend's criminal past, something that she claims to have known, but did not understand the true severity of the facts. From what she knew, Troy had been incriminated for something he did not commit, and his mother had even helped him, making the decision to move to start a new life. But well, in those weeks she had also started to have some suspicious attitudes that did not quite fit in with the way Driver used to behave. And it's that one weekend when he was supposed to be at home to accompany one of his children who had suffered a loss, he decided that he would go camping. He had said that his entire family could accompany him, but when they refused, he made the decision to go alone. By going alone, there was no way to confirm an alibi. In that video, for some reason, he didn't take it out. He didn't erase it. It's right there. He got home on 12th at 7:55. He got out of his truck and is walking when he gets home, and his hands are in his pockets and his head is down. And when he gets in front of Masubaru, he starts to turn around, and then he does this and he looks very sad, very worried. After this camping trip, Zulema noticed that his behavior was strange. He stayed up late into the night cleaning the van, something he didn't usually do, and even rushed to change the van's tires, something they had been putting off to do when they got their tax return. All of this indicated that Troy was hiding something. But what was that secret? Every detail that Zulema mentioned turned into something incriminating for her partner, like the fact that he enjoyed listening to audiobooks about serial killers and the story of Israel Kiss, a thug who had ended the life of a girl and had kept her on ice, so he could take pictures of the body, and the girl looked as if she was still alive. However, a crucial detail that directly links Naomi to Troy Driver are the dating apps. Naomi used these apps to meet people and went on frequent dates, like the one I told you about earlier. The day before the deprivation of freedom, the young woman had gone out with someone. Troy, for his part, maintained a very active profile on apps of this kind, so we can deduce that they both knew each other in this way. By this time, 15 days had already passed since Naomi's disappearance. Time was running out quickly, and the possibility of finding her alive was becoming increasingly remote. Thus, they decided to make public the arrest of Troy Driver, in the hope that someone could add some kind of information to the case. From that moment, several people called to give information about it, including women who confirmed having been followed by a person very similar to Driver to the same parking lot where Naomi was deprived of her freedom. Another call that alerted the authorities was from a co-worker of the man who assured that a month before the disappearance, an excavator had arrived at his work at the request of Troy Driver himself. The same employee was able to speak with the person who made the delivery and received the address to which the machinery had been taken. It was a place approximately 15.5 miles from the company, exactly in the area of the Buena Vista iron mine. There, in the middle of nowhere, in a place that the officers would hardly reach on their own, and to which they would not have had access if it were not for the information provided by Driver's colleague, they made the discovery they least wanted to make. On March 29th, just over 2 weeks after Naomi's disappearance, an improvised grave was exhumed, where human remains were found. It took 2 days to confirm that the remains unfortunately belonged to the 18-year-old girl. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had been shot in the back of her head, and then in the chest. This last shot had been made when the body was already in the hole that would become her grave. Unfortunately, it was also confirmed that before she lost her life, or it was taken from her, she had been taken advantage of intimately. Tire marks from Driver's truck were also found all over the area, specifically the ones he had before making the urgent change. Many people also testified afterwards that they had seen Driver operating the excavator. There were officially no doubts left then. Troy Driver was now much more than a suspect. After learning about all these details, Zulema decides to cooperate with the police as much as possible regarding the case. Troy, unaware of this, decides to call his girlfriend to talk to her. The officers are by her side when she receives the call. "I don't know if you can answer me. Are you being honest with me?" "Darling." "What?" "Darling, these calls are recorded. They're going to make me look guilty, and I'm never going to get out of prison. To be listening to the things that they say about you. Everything I'm remembering about you." In April of the year 2022, Troy Driver is formally charged with murder, robbery, vehicle theft, and destruction of evidence. Additionally, he was accused of abuse as his deoxyribonucleic acid was found on the body and inside Naomi. Months later, he managed to get a letter to his now ex-girlfriend Zulema, in which he admitted his guilt on all charges, and in some phrases expressed that he was filled with guilt and remorse, and that he could not live with that feeling. It wouldn't be long until the man had his first suicide attempt. In total, he would make 2 attempts, even when he was being constantly watched. The third suicide attempt was finally the last one. This jerk cowardly took his own life. In the early days after August 2023, 43-year-old Troy Driver, as I tell you, took his own life in the maximum security prison where he was awaiting trial for the crime of Naomi. He was alone in his cell and had no contact with other detainees. For Naomi's family, on the other hand, the trial would have been a way to bring closure to something that would leave a mark on them for the rest of their lives. Both her mother and brother confessed that in some way this news gave them a sense of relief that there were no more victims of Driver. But they cannot deny that, in some way, this guy's departure also generated a sense of helplessness. Cases like Naomi's can awaken our anger at injustice and raise a few questions. Among them are what would have happened if the family did not have contacts within the Federal Bureau of Investigation. How much longer would they have dismissed the young woman's case? In the end, it's hard to overlook the police negligence and the fact that families have to conduct searches on their own because security services do not fulfill their most important purpose, which is to protect citizens. But if you like these types of cases, you can now find my podcast on many more mysteries every Thursday.